everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Psychonaut Sessions. It's your host, Daniel Muller, and I'm here with the one and only legend, the Kansas City Tmnt aficionado, Buster Moody. How you doing?
Oh, man. Good. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm doing really good. For those of you that do not know, I came into contact with you through, I found out your work through Kyle. I met Kyle at Comic-Con not this last Comic-Con, but the one before that was in the fall. And for those
talking about Kyle Strom, of course.
Yes, Kyle Strom, another one and only, another stand-up guy. And he saw all of my psychedelic oriented stuff and he was like, you need to get in contact with Buster Moody.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, okay. And I go over there and then this is staring me in the face. And I was like, oh shit. Like, I love this man already. So you're highly known for your Tmnt work. And I also just picked up Limbo Beach from Vince Staples. And this is actually it's Z2 Comics, but it's like a Simon and Schuster imprint, isn't it?
I think they may do the distribution,
right.
if I'm not mistaken. But Z2 is kind of their own publisher, though. Yeah.
Your work is astounding. The level of energy and just power that's in them. I mean, like especially going through these books, there's not a moment, and I haven't read your Kickstarter book yet. To be honest, I haven't. I just noticed and found out and realized today, even though it says in this book to go to your Patreon, that you have an exclusive comic on your Patreon, Laser Storm.
Yes, yeah.
But I read Limbo Beach after meeting up with you at Fountain City Comic-Con. Every panel is just it's just like full of life, and I really appreciate that level because there's not a moment to rest. And there are comics out there that I love, but there might be some pacing issues sometimes where it's like, okay, this is getting a little like, all right. But
yeah,
like even when there's exposition or whatever, you're still finding a way to bring a power punch to the whole thing. So.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's really kind. Everything that you said is very kind. I have a few things to say about that. I'll say that as far as like the pacing and stuff goes with Limbo Beach, like I want to give credit to the writers. All credit due to Vince and Brian Hill and Chris Robinson. Like those guys are awesome. So yeah, I want to attribute a lot of the strong story points to those dudes. So yeah, but thanks, man. Yeah, I will say also, I guess one caveat to like the Patreon is I need to adjust my Patreon right now, so I wouldn't really direct anybody toward there at this moment. Laser Storm is kind of on hiatus, so I hit a point whenever I was like working on that book where I guess I'll say like there was just a rough patch basically, and that book has not really bounced back since then. Like I did Limbo Beach, I've done a few other short things in the meantime, so I've stayed busy, but I need to get back to Laser Storm. That's kind of like the next big thing that I would like to return to and kind of finish that first arc of that story. So
right on. Well, yeah, you let me know whenever you start getting that Patreon back up and going, because I would like to sign up.
Absolutely, I will do that.
Which will make you one of the very few Patreons that I'm a patron to. So, but I just totally dig your style. It's got, I was talking to you at Comic-Con. So let me caveat this. If I'm talking up someone's work, I might be using a lot of hyperbole, but that's just because I'm getting really excited. Uh-huh. I'm only talking to people that I really dig their work. So I'm not blowing smoke up your ass, and I'm not trying to just, be a salesman here. So, but there was an aspect of your work that's got that sort of sketchy underground Crumb style that I get really drawn to because he's a big influence. And I was telling you about that at Comic-Con. And so this kind of just leads me into the way that you draw the turtles is astounding, and you always have that incredible level of detail on every image. I mean, you're posting on your Instagram commissions that you're doing. It seems like you're a commission king. And so can anybody request commissions from you at any point in time? And I might even like throw some images of some of your commissions on the screen if you're down with that.
Yeah, that'd be cool, man. I love doing commissions for people. And I'll take most commissions that I get. I don't always post all the commissions that I get. I post the ones that I like and that are fun for me, the ones that I have and the stuff that it's like, I want to encourage more people to get this type of commission from me, because I do all kinds of commissions for people at this point. But yeah, I'll still do commissions of things like family pets and or family pictures and stuff. I really don't like doing stuff like that, but I'll still take that stuff also, to be honest, because I like making art for people, so that's fine, but but yeah, like the stuff that I can really have fun with and like, spend some real time on and make it look badass or something, then like that's the stuff where it's like, oh yeah, I'll absolutely post this because that's what I want to be doing more of, but yeah, I've been very fortunate with commissions, especially like in the last few years, man. I think a lot of it started with like the Turtles fans, to be honest. Like that's what really kind of made me realize that there's like a huge collector base that likes original sketches from people, like I got sketches at shows and stuff like that, but I even feel like show commissions are way different than like people that collect even show commissions are different than people that maybe will, wait on a commission from an artist or something. So it's just a completely different type approach. At least for me, art-wise, it is for how I will do that commission. But yeah, I never really got like a ton of like, I guess, take-home commissions or do-at-home commissions until I really started doing the Turtles work. And once I started doing that stuff, like that fan base is amazing. The Turtles fans are like some of the coolest fans, at least that I've seen. As far as most like fandoms go, like the Turtles fans are really cool. So anyway, like yeah, that's kind of I attribute, I guess, me starting off doing a lot of commissions for people with like probably it really started for me with the Turtles fans. So, and I still stay pretty busy with TMNT commissions. Like, maybe one in every, a quarter of my commissions maybe will be Turtles commissions still. I'm doing one. I'm working on one right now even. So yeah.
I was going to ask what you were working on.
I'm doing this. I'm doing a page recreation of. I think it's page 26 from the original Turtles.
What you doing? Is it the Shredder page? Isn't that one that you were working on at Fountain City?
I was working on it there, and I'm doing I finished the inks and I'm doing the screen tones now, so I'm recreating this page here, which is page 27. So I'm working on doing the tones at the moment, but there's my oh my god, that's so beautiful. So I was going to ask, so you do all the screen tones by hand? Yeah, not always. Well, for commissions it is always, but like if I have it usually on pages and stuff like that, like interior pages, I'll usually skip doing it on the interior page, like on the physical page, because I would rather get to it in Photoshop and I can just do it a lot faster there. But I think that, like, there's a certain expectation with commissions, and I kind of like to take it to that level as well. But with this one specifically, of course, like the Turtles book famously has like the duotone pages, so
yeah,
which gives like that heavy it's almost like a screen tone type look and effect. So whenever like if I'm trying to recreate that, then I'm like, well, I gotta include the actual tones on the page for that commission, so
my level of respect for you is just elevated immensely.
Oh, well, thanks, man.
I've not dived into screen tones yet. Just not quite there. I haven't taken the leap.
Well, they're fun, man. I guess the funny thing was whenever I first started trying to do screen tones, I've always liked them because all of like the mangaka that I like, all of the Japanese artists that I liked, you know, the manga all had screen tones that they would use for shading. And I was like, in my mind, I was like a huge, I loved Crumb, Mobius. I like those guys that over render with like their lines, but I was like, well, maybe if I could find like a happy medium where I just, a lot of that work with the screen tone instead of like having to hatch everything, you know, for like to get to the level of shading that I wanted. So that's why I kind of justified starting, you know, using screen tone maybe like a decade ago. I was just really trying to cut corners, but that's not actually what ended up happening. It kind of just added another level to the process. But now I also just love the way that it looks. I love the texture that you can get from it. I'm just a huge fan of the look of it. So
that page is gorgeous.
Oh, thank you, man.
Okay, so I would like to just go back in time to wee little Buster, tiny Buster, to kind of explore where you felt like your transition was to an interest in art and illustration, and like when that transformed into being your life, and how that transformed into being the passion of like, I'm gonna fucking do this. Like, was it always a thing that you knew from the very beginning, or was it something you grew into? And how does Wee Buster start?
Well, I guess like it starts in elementary school, man, and I do have like a very distinct memory of the time when I don't think it was necessarily the decision was made that this is what I'm going to do, but it was kind of the moment of realization that this is something that I can do that maybe other people can't do, you know, to the same level. And for me, that was like I think I was like in first or second grade even, you know, so it was like super early, but I had an art teacher who gave us an assignment basically to copy a piece of artwork that we found. It couldn't be like a photograph, it needed to be like an illustration, and we could just like copy the illustration that we found. And my parents would go to like the Chiefs games, and they would get like the 32-ounce cups, which had like illustrations of the players along like the outside of the cups. So for that assignment, I like went home and I like copied this image of like Joe Montana, and he was like, his legs were like crossing and he was like twisting, you know, to like throw the ball, you know, because he was the quarterback at the time, I guess. And so anyway, I did that drawing, and I didn't think anything of it because I was just copying the drawing that was in there, which is what I did with my comics and with my coloring books. That's like how I learned how to draw, was just copying. But I remember my art teacher was like, oh, the way that you like drew these legs overlapping with each other, like the other kids can't do that. The other kids still draw stick figures, you know? She was like, this is really good. So to me, that was like a big moment of realization where it was like, oh, I'm capable of doing something. That was the first time, I guess, in my entire life where I'd be like, oh, I'm actually capable of doing something that other people around me can't do, you know? So I guess that feeling of like, that was like a really cool feeling to just feel like, oh, I feel special because I can do this cool thing, you know. That's where I trace the actual like the origin of my, I'm gonna draw harder now, you know, like I'm gonna actually try and do this more, you know. But even at that time, like I was trying to make my own comic books. And all through elementary school, I like have, you know, notebooks that are just filled with terrible comics that I was making at the time. So, so like that's, so I think that like probably by the end of grade school, probably by the end of 5th grade or 6th grade or something, I had probably already decided that I was going to always do artwork, you know. So that's when I think, you know, but really that moment in elementary school was with my art teacher. That was like the catalyst for, you know, me even thinking that I would do artwork, you know. So
well, God bless that art teacher.
Yeah, Mrs. Osmond, she was great.
Giving you that boost. So did you go to school, higher education? Did you go to art school or college and major in art? Did you get any kind of formal training outside of just you drawing?
Yeah, so I did go to the Kansas City Art Institute for college. They drew me into the school with the promise of their illustration department. Of course, the 4-year window that I went to the school, they got rid of the illustration department. It was completely gone. It has since come back, and it's like one of their biggest, most successful departments, which honestly, I think it could have been at that time also, just because there were so many people that had interest in it. But because of that, I went and I majored in animation instead. So.
Wow.
Yeah, which honestly is cool, because that's where I learned like After Effects, and that's where I learned video editing software, which is also what I do primarily now as my main income source. Is I'm a video editor and motion graphics animator.
So I assume on your YouTube channel, you're the one that did like some of the commercials and video stuff.
Yep.
On there.
Yeah. So like the Task Force Rad Squad Kickstarter video. Yep. I did all of that, the entirety of that video. So yeah. So yeah, I like messing around with stuff like that. Also, I've also like made random, one-off YouTube videos where I did like video composites and animations to songs, beats, and rap songs that I like. So yeah, I definitely still do that stuff, and that's primarily what I do also, like I said, for my job. So yeah, I like doing that stuff. I would love to at some point direct some sort of animation, but that is a crazy amount of work on top of all of the comics that I want to draw anyways. So
yeah.
But yeah, man. So yeah, I went to the Art Institute and graduated there, and then also after I graduated, I taught there for the illustration department for a couple semesters. So yeah, I went to KCAI.
Were you always in the was that your intro into the KC area, or have you always been here?
I was born in Flint, Michigan, so that's actually where I was born. My dad used to work in Detroit and would commute there, but he eventually lost his job at General Motors, so my family moved to Idaho, which is where my brother was born, and then we moved to Kansas City when I was like 5, and my sister was born here. So a few years after that, she was born. So I've been here since I was 5. So I've been here for most of my life, So Kansas City, I consider my home. So
I will note that you are the first Kansas City artist that I've had on.
Okay. Yeah.
As a session. So yay! I'm finally
Nice.
representing.
Cheers.
Yeah. So how did you make the step into finally making comics and because you seem highly involved in the local KC Comics community. If you go to any convention, a Buster Moody table is like a staple, it seems.
Yeah.
So like what were your steps into that?
Well, when I was at the Art Institute, so yes, they did not have the illustration department whenever I was there. However, there was an illustration class taught by Hector Casanova. Hector Casanova is another local Kansas City artist. He did the artwork on Steve Niles' Lurkers book, is what it was called. And he did the artwork on an image book called Screamland. So I took his class, and I guess he liked my work enough to suggest me to another local artist who I interned with and started coloring their work for them. And then the following semester after that, I interned with Hector himself. And then I finished coloring, I helped him basically finish coloring Screamland for Image, and did a backup story in that one. So basically that being kind of like among some of my first published work, those guys were going to shows to promote Screamland. It was a book coming out from Image at the time. So Hector and Harold Sipe, who was the writer on that book, they were traveling around going to shows, and so they were going to set up for Planet, and Harold offered for me to split the booth with him basically 1 year at Planet. So I split the booth with Harold, and that basically was my first show that I set up at. And then I feel like it was probably at that show when somebody came and they asked me like what my commission rates were, and I realized that I didn't have any. I'd never thought about it before. Like I didn't know what to price my artwork at, because I really had no idea that anybody actually would want to pay, for my artwork. So I was still a student at the time, so I feel like I that really was my introduction into the whole entire doing cons and everything. So I'd gone to cons as a fan, since I was a kid, but that was my first time kind of being on the other side of the table, so they say, I suppose. But so yeah, that kind of is what started me down that path. And then once I started actually making money at shows, that's when I decided I would like expand the shows that I went to and tried to go to. And I started doing Emerald City and Heroes and C2E2 and just, shows that are more around the country. So, which I've since scaled back in the last few years since my wife and I started having kids. But yeah, that's how I started doing shows. So of course, yeah, now I'll still do regional shows. I still do almost all of the regional shows. I'll still drive out to St. Louis even a lot of the times, and yeah, post COVID also, I haven't done any shows where I've had to really travel to. I've tried to stay, within the region. But.
So, how did you get into the Turtles arena? I mean, obviously you've always had that interest, but what was your first official Turtles work? And
the first thing that I did for them in an official capacity was the retailer incentive variant cover for TMNT, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the main series from IDW, number 41. And it was like the introduction to Pigeon Pete was the character. So I did like a variant cover for that one where like it's Pigeon Pete, and he's got Bebop and Rocksteady on each side of him. So that was really fun. That was cool. The way that I got that job was actually through that fan comic that's in that Zine Age Mutant Ninja Turtles that you have there. That fan comic Caleb and I did, and we published that on Tumblr, Twitter. We just put it online basically, and it got a lot of traction. I had several people tell me to email, the IDW editor and say that, they'd sent me and all that. Accumulating up into eventually at New York Comic Con that year, I went and saw Eastman and showed it to him on my iPad, and he told me that he had already like saved it on his computer and sent it to Bobby, the editor at IDW, and told him to like get me a cover or something, So that was really awesome, man. So I feel like that also, I had talked to Bobby prior to that, but still hearing that from Kevin was like one of the coolest things that ever, that's ever happened to me. And in comics, I don't know if that one will be topped. So that was really awesome.
Yeah, that's up there. Holy shit, that's really cool. Have you had any contact with him since, or has there been any interest?
Yeah, man, it's been actually really cool. I've seen him at a few different shows, and we did a signing at a show or at a store together in Lawrence. It's the shop is no longer open, but Boom Comics Lawrence is what it was called. And he did a signing there, and I did a signing. Which was awesome. So I got to hang out with him around that time. And just like a couple other like events. He was at Planet Comic Con. He was a guest for that. So I hung out with him a little bit around that time too. So, but nothing serious. We're not like close homies or anything like that, but he's a really awesome dude. He's like a great creator. One of the few comic creators who I guess is in contrast to like the don't meet your idols type mentality. He's like maybe the exception that proves that rule, so but yeah, he's definitely one of those heroes that was great meeting, and I've loved and appreciate the fact that I've been able to hang out with him. So yeah, actually one of the few pieces of original artwork that I have framed is a piece that I got from, I'll show it to you, man.
Please do.
Yeah, so
beautiful.
And he put to Buster, an awesome artist. So yeah,
that's
really sick, man.
Yeah, save that one forever.
Yeah.
Bury yourself with that.
Oh yeah. Yep, love that piece. So
that's great.
Yeah, man. So so I was super hyped about that, and then that's what led to all of the IDW stuff happening. And then just over the next following few years after that, I feel like every year I would just do like one or two things for them, either for the Turtles. I did a Godzilla issue, also Godzilla in Hell #3. So
right, yep.
So yeah, for a while there, I was just doing a few little things for IDW here and there. So but yeah, that's what led to that, was that fan comic specifically. So
I've always been afraid of that whole, meeting your idol thing, because I've heard some I know you did some work for Eli Schwab and one of his turtle zines, and he was on his Psychonaut session. He never named the creator, of course, because we're not going to do that, because this isn't bashing anyone, but he met his idol, and it was like not good. It was not a great, there's like a lot of ego there and shit. But I've fortunately have had a positive interaction too, because I got to do a sit down with Rick Veitch.
Oh, nice.
Interview, and that, I mean, talk about meetings, one of your heroes and finding out, oh, thank God they're just a normal dude. They're just he's just a cool, laid back guy, and still.
That's really funny. I don't know if you would be able to classify his comics as just like a normal laid back comics or anything. Obviously not. So,
I know that's what I was a little like afraid of. But see, what was cool about that is he and I have had a simpatico in terms of all the shit that we're into, because he's into alchemy,
all the
occult.
Culture,
I mean, he was just like we were just able to talk, but also just chill, not excitable, not he wasn't, there was no ego attached to anything he did, and you wouldn't know. And this is what I love about him, as opposed to someone like Alan Moore, who's like a good friend of his. Alan Moore is just so overt with who he is. He's out, like if he walked into a room, it's like even if he just was quiet, his presence would be so fucking loud. But if Rick Veitch just walked into a room, you would almost not even know he was there. He's just a regular guy in a shirt and jeans, and he doesn't stand out, but his mind and his creations are fucking astounding.
Oh yeah, man, that's great. Well, yeah, I'm happy to hear that. And of course, it's not always the case. There are a few creators who have been disappointed with their disappointed to find out that unfortunately maybe their online persona is not a persona. So but where it's like, oh, it seems like this is just kind of an act, like really kind of laying it on thick for the internet, and then you like meet them and it's like, oh, maybe not, maybe that's just the way it is. But different people like different things, so.
Well, so far, because I mentioned, we talked, I talked to you a little bit before we jumped on, that I just, because I denied my inner calling to do comics, which is something I always wanted to do since I was a kid. And I just recently, in the past few years, decided, what the fuck am I doing? Just do it, Daniel. And started doing it. And being here in the comics community, I never even went to conventions. I didn't involve, of course, I kind of got disenchanted with comics after a long time, and I didn't really understand the breadth of the underground movement that was out there, which is very important to me, because I don't have any interest in anything mainstream. But I was really pleasantly surprised last year when I finally started going to cons, of just the community, the KC community that does exist, and how supportive it seems. Of course, so I've only really met and interacted with you, Kyle Strom, and Baldemar Rivas. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Baldemar Rivas, yeah.
Rivas.
Yeah.
It's like three of some of the nicest guys, and I'm almost afraid to go meet anyone else, because like, oh, these guys are so nice. And it's way different than the last time I ever went to a con, which was probably like 16, 17 years ago. Everybody seems like really ready and excited to just support one another and have some sort of connectivity. So do you know if there's any kind of is there any formalization around or is it just like over time everybody just kind of started getting to know each other at the cons and just like hanging out and befriending one another? Do you because I know a long time ago when I first moved to Kansas City in 2001, there was actually like a comics creators community at that time. That like had a website and everything, and I don't think it exists anymore.
No, I don't think that exists anymore either. I was never in on any of that, though. I remember Kyle talking about that a little bit. The KC Comics Creators Network or something like that is maybe what it's called. Yeah. So I was never part of that or anything. But yeah, I guess the way that I met Kyle and Baldemar, I met Baldemar through Kyle, but Kyle and I have been good comics homies for a long time now. At this point, it's been 10 years probably. But that was just from doing shows. Yeah, it was from doing local shows, and because we would see each other at local shows. And then at that time, like the comics community, I feel like was even more social than it is now. Like there were semi-annual parties that would happen at people's places, like there would be a Halloween party, there would just be parties out, like a New Year's party and all that stuff, and there would be like comics community parties surrounding all of the shows and stuff. So we would just see each other and hang out at those shows, and then eventually it was like, well, hey, there's a show in Lawrence this weekend, do you want to like carpool to the show in Lawrence? So then we would carpool, and then it's like, well, we'll all hang out and drink beers after the show. And then so honestly, that's just the way that it happens. It's just like, oh, well, we're all kind of like hanging out. We're all in the same area. Let's just continue hanging out, So, and then eventually, like the studio situation happened. I've had friends that were in that studio space for a long time, since pretty much whenever I was a student at the Art Institute. So it's been like 12 years now at this point, but yeah, so I've always been in and out of that studio space, but in like the last 2 years it's kind of been occupied mostly by Kansas City comic creators. And right now in there it's like in this there's like a studio space in the West Bottoms. I know we were talking about it a little bit before, so I guess I should give the context for it.
I was gonna ask if you could.
There's an area of town in KC called like the West Bottoms, which is kind of like an old warehouse district, a lot of it's kind of being turned around into like, they're doing lofts down there. They're doing like antique stores and cool bars and restaurants. But this artist studio building, Hobbs, has been down there for a long time. And there's like a small group of Kansas City creators that share a studio space in the Hobbs building in Kansas City. So we all kind of hang out there. They're gracious enough to like let me crash their studio space pretty, semi-frequently. I can go and hang out there and, draw with them. So, in there right now, I guess the people that are occupying that space, it's Kyle, of course, Kyle Strom, Valdemar Rivas, Jake Smith, Matt Fox, Eric Lundy, Scott Drummond, Christopher Harris. And then there's another dude that doesn't do comics. I forget his name is escaping me now. I feel so bad. But anyway, yeah. So there's a lot of comics folks that hang out there, and luckily they let me hang out there also. So.
Is that the same studio space or area where Scotty Young has his studio?
No, his space is in Old Johnson County. It's in Old Overland Park, I think. So it's a little bit more out in the burbs. So it's a cool area too. But I've never been to his studio space, but I know where it's at over there in Old Overland Park.
So I noticed, because I was trying to, believe it or not, I do try to do a little just research on people before I start talking to them, so I'm not just going in completely blind. But you make music too, man. I was listening to your shit earlier, and like, wow, I really like it. That's the kind of stuff that I really dig listening to while I work.
Thanks, man.
You want to go into your music background a little bit and kind of talk about what your interests are there? I kind of make electronic beats. I make a lot of sample-based beats, but honestly, just instrumental hip-hop or beat music is for the most part what I make music-wise. I don't know if I would like to like limit it to that specifically, but that's kind of the realm that it lives in. So
Yeah, so I started making electronic music and just like loops, basically, whenever I was in high school, just in Fruity Loops. I would just kind of make like up-tempo, almost like aggressive electronic kind of beats, you know? And then I kind of like learned more about sampling. Honestly, I had friends that made hip-hop beats, and whenever I was hanging out with them, I just like looked over their shoulder how they would sample records and stuff. I mean, we would just be hanging out, smoking anyway or whatever, and then like we'd listen to some records, go to the record store and buy records and just listen to them, and then be like, you know, my friends would be like, oh, I'm gonna sample that sound, you know. So then they would sample it, and then I would actually get to experience them building, you know, a beat off of samples from vinyl, you know, records. So after that, I kind of just like fell in love with that entire process. So like I wanted to just do that, and then like from doing that, and you know, I just really like making music. It's to me, it's like one of the most pure. I don't know music. I don't know musical theory. I don't know anything like that. I can't read a sheet of music, but like for me, it's like a pure artistic form of expression, because I feel like you can feel it. You can like feel if it's like right or not, you know? So for me, that's what I really like about it, is that like, it's just kind of, I can have an idea and maybe I won't capture that idea specifically, but I can capture that same feeling of that idea pretty quickly, way more expediently than with comics, to be honest. So like, that's one of the things that I loved about making, you know, beats at that time, was just that quickness of getting to that point where it feels like, oh, that point, that you know, that expressive fulfillment is like way more easy to attain, I feel like, in beat making than it is in comic making. So but I love you know, I love making beats that aren't just sample sounds too. You know, I like doing soundscapes and just kind of like weird experiments with sounds, and sometimes it'll form into a song, and sometimes not. So I have way more, you know, musically I have way more sketches even than I have you know, drawings. I have hundreds and hundreds of beats or songs that I'll start and never finish. So
I have a friend who is a violinist for the Topeka Orchestra, and you know, she often talks with us about how you really don't need to know a lick of music theory in order to actually understand in music. And it's because, like what she was saying, sometimes you don't even know how to read music. It's one of the more accessible arts, because for some reason every human being, like I know people that won't even look at a comic because it drives them crazy, but everybody responds to rhythm in some way, shape, or form, whether they know it or not.
Yeah,
it's just so such a visceral art form that's just, it seems so embedded into our DNA. I would be one to argue that drawing is actually in our DNA too, because that's just the way we communicated for like hundreds of millions of years, and even writing is drawing to a certain extent. Like I try to convince people of that, but I mean, music obviously more so. It was probably even one of the first original languages.
Well, everything built starts as a drawing, you know. Everything built, you know, has to start as a drawing. But music, rhythm, beats, you know, our bodies have their own rhythm that they run on. So of course, like, music would just be an extension of that. Like our heartbeats and just the way that our body operates, you know, is rhythmic in nature, or can be, you know. So yeah, it makes sense to me that it feels like it's inherent that we understand when something sounds good or sounds right, you know. But that's also, you know, then there's also, you know, stuff that kind of deconstructs those notions and those ideas, and I think that's valid too. So but
what do you mean in regards to that stuff that deconstructs? What do you mean by that?
I guess more experimental music, I suppose, noise music, stuff that kind of doesn't operate within the bounds of like rhythm,
like atonal jazz and
yeah, just stuff that doesn't really adhere to the rules of maybe musical beauty, I guess. But but is more experimental in nature. So that stuff is all valid also. But then, of course, that speaks to another aspect of human nature: exploration and pushing boundaries. So yeah, all art forms are valid, man. They're all awesome. So like music, comics, anything where people can express themselves like in unique ways is rad to me.
Do you experiment with that level of deconstruction in your music, and do you where is like the bridging point between your music and your comics? Do you see any correlation at all in the two works?
Not much, to be honest. Sometimes a project that I'll be working on, like I'll feel like there's a certain scene or something that I can express the vibe of in music or something like that, or there's an idea that I want to go for in a comic and a scene that I can more easily find in music, So then maybe I'll lay down a loop or something that I can just play whenever I'm drawing. Stuff like that will happen, but usually that stuff will never make it into like a final song that I'll complete, That's just kind of like trying to find my own moodscape, if that makes sense,
Oh yeah.
Just to kind of like get into the vibe of whatever the scene is that I'm trying to capture. So
I was just thinking, and for myself, because I dabble in making music. My wife is more the musician than I am, but sometimes I'll sit down and we'll play together, and we will construct and compose some things together, playfully. But when I do that, I've noticed that my process of creation is actually very similar in the sense that I don't have a very distinct structural method as to how I approach a storyline versus a song. It's usually just starting with some kind of like emotion or a feeling, and then there's no sequential order to it. It'll actually just kind of bounce all over the place until I can finally, like, formulaically, somehow pull it all together into some sort of narrative. So I actually see a lot of ties to that, and the only place where I'm different creatively is when I'm writing prose, because I write regular books. I don't know what that means, but I write prose as well, fiction and nonfiction, and it's that's very different. That is seems way more of a like I actually have to become more of a project manager, which is what I do in my day job, actually. In order to execute something at that caliber, which is very interesting. So that's why I was kind of getting at in terms of I feel a very strong connection between making comics and making music in that sense, and I get the same level of satisfaction for me, personally.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess maybe kind of what you're talking about is like the exploratory nature of like finding the song, the melody, or whatever it is that you're trying to find musically. That can happen similarly, visually whenever you're making art, or at least for me. I don't always put down the line in the right place. I don't always draw the pose the correct way the first time, so a lot of times it's just like trying to find that, as I'm sketching it out until I can kind of approximate it. And then once I can approximate it, the inking process, I guess, to equate it to the musical process, is the same as maybe hitting the record button. So it's like, once you hit that record button, it's like, all right, well, I sketched this out, I practiced it, like I practiced it out in my mind, I know what I need to hit, I know what the timing is, and then it's like, then you actually have to lay it down. So there's always the point of having to actually do the thing, but I can definitely see that there are parallels between making music and making artwork, although to me, just the process is so much faster making music. Like, I can sketch a lot faster making music than I can sketch, or I can bring it to a more refined sketch a lot faster musically than with my drawings at this point. So. But that's just me, and that's just the way that I draw also, and the way that I work and make music. So everybody else will be different in the way that they do things, but and a lot of people are way faster than I am art-wise too. So that's another thing I guess to make note of. But yeah, like I make beats. I still make beats. I don't do it like I don't dedicate nearly as much time to it as I used to. But I like to put out an EP for like each of my kids as they're born. So I have like the last couple musical releases that I've put out are like dedicated to my kids. You know. So that's probably what I'll do. I'm one behind now, so because I got a new baby on the way, but so I need to put out some music. But I've got so many tracks that I'm sitting on that I'll probably put out an EP before the end of this year, I would guess, if not two. So, but
how many
my dozens
do you have so far? Are you on number 3?
Number 4. My wife is pregnant with number 4, so she's actually over 8.5 months pregnant now, so I keep on glancing down at my phone. I told her she's up in bed right now, and I told her if anything starts to happen, let me know. So
yeah. Oh wow. Good luck to you. That's awesome.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
I know that really journey. Excited. When if any of them haven't hit the middle school years yet, just. Word of warning, invest in alcohol now.
Yeah.
It is quite the journey.
Yeah. I imagine it probably is. You have grown kids, is that right? Your kids are grown at this point?
So, well, no. I mean, I have 2 that just graduated and moved out.
Okay.
And then one that we still have. He's a sophomore, so we still got a couple more years with him. But man, yeah, nobody properly warned me about those middle school years and what they would do to the human soul.
Yeah. Well, do you have boys and girls? Is it just boys?
3 boys.
3 boys. Okay.
Yeah. So, and actually, you know, in reality, I you know, there was hardship, yes, but I mean, we were pretty damn lucky. Our kids had pretty level heads on their shoulders. They all got like, they're all just naturally kind-hearted human beings, all very smart. You know, so a lot of this shit that we dealt with was just like, oh, you're a lazy teenager kind of bullshit. I mean, the stuff that, you know, trying to get them to like do their chores kind of stuff.
Right.
But overall, we really are, because I mean, we look at a lot of the kids of our peers. So you were talking about, you know, Kyle out in the burbs. I'm in Olathe. Out here, which we don't like it here. We're both country people and grew up in the country. And But we had to move here due to circumstances. Anyway, that we're like, I don't know if it's a suburb thing. I don't want to be judgmental to anybody who's listening or whatever, but a lot of the peers of our kids, like their parents, they treat parenting like this friendship gig.
Yeah.
You know, in a way where there's, you know, not a lot of like, I don't even want to say discipline. It's just boundaries. It's just like I was lucky because my wife was, still is a preschool teacher.
Oh, awesome.
And is very good with kids actually of all ages, because she used to do work with teenagers as well. Actually in her current position, she works with teenagers too. And she understands the concept of having a benevolent relationship with your children, but also being actually in her method, the Waldorf method. I don't know if you know anything about that. They talk about being a benevolent dictator. And so it's really truly like the kids don't get to decide, but there's a benevolent way in which you can kind of approach the situation. And also, you know, psychologically, children actually, even though they'll rebel against it, and we encourage that. I always encouraged to rebel against any boundaries we set down, but they need those boundaries to feel safe.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what provides the security for them. My wife is into educational theory and methods also. She actually got her doctorate in early education, childhood leadership. So
oh, nice.
And she was a reading She was a reading intervention specialist also at an elementary school, and a first grade teacher for several years before we started having kids. So,
excellent.
So yeah, she's like super well equipped for early childhood, which is great for us. But yeah, so like with what you're saying, it's right now there's just like this huge trend with it's called gentle parenting. And we've read a couple of those books also, but like a lot of the theory comes from like not telling your children no. Like there's one author in particular, and she just like is insistent that you just do not speak the words no to your child. And we kind of did that for a while with Theodore, our first kid, but and we actually think that it maybe causes some irreparable harm, because there are certain things where kids need to be told like no, absolutely not. Like that is a no. It's like there's certain things that are an absolute no. Especially when you're teaching kids, and it's not, and it isn't because you're, if you're talking about the benevolent dictator, it's not because you're like, just trying to impose your will on them. Like it's because like children need to actually be protected. Like kids will kill themselves. They'll hurt themselves. They'll break their bones, and they have no regard for safety or anything. So it's like kids need hard no's. Like touching the stove. That is like a no. Like that's absolutely, you can say no to your kid for that. But so that's like one of those things that like that gentle parenting trend, that's one of those things that we kind of explored that for a little while also, and I feel like we're still sort of recovering from that, because like I still like I completely agree with where it's coming from. I agree with like wanting to have that positive relationship with your kid, but unfortunately, and like, so ironically, I'm an anarchist, and I'm anti-authoritarian, and like I'm anti-totalitarianism. Like I'm anti all of these things where it's like, as a parent, I now need to like take on this role, but it is that, the benevolency is the difference there, where it's like, it is true that like the only thing that I want and care about is for my kids to like be healthy and to be taken care of and to grow, that's definitely not something that you can say for any government that's ever existed in the history of mankind. So like I think that there's like a time and a place for like authority, like there is such a thing as like good authority. You're never going to see that in government. You're never going to see that in a corrupt establishment or a system. Like that'll never exist there. But like obviously in like a parental child relationship, like that authority dynamic has to exist, and it's not a bad thing. Like that, it's a natural thing. It's literally, we've developed this way so that way we can preserve our kids so they can continue on. So
you called like self an anarchist, so like I assume you probably mean like anarchist really in the true sort of social, like political sense. I guess.
Yes.
So I very much have ascribed to that myself, and I had a lot of issues in parenting as well, and trying to reconcile that. And one of the best things we did as a family, we went to and we're huge Colorado people, and we go there we're eventually gonna fucking move there because it's the best state ever. And we went, there was a wolf reserve that we went to there when the kids were really little, but they were just old enough that it is like burned into their brain. And so it's like acres and acres of fence where like it's like a wolf like protection, like conservation. They get wolves that like get trapped, or other scenarios where they've been where there's been like fires, or they've been pushed out of their habitat, and they're trying to like rehabilitate them, and they end up like staying there and having this community. And there's a group of people there. It's pretty much all volunteers that take care of them. Blah 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 blah. I'm speaking too much. Anyway, we did a day there where they give you a tour, and you can like interact with the wolves to the extent where they actually will put you in a pen with them, and the wolves will come up and like actually like sniff you and interact with you. And they taught us something about the way wolves parent, and the way that it's very important within the familial unit to have a sense of authority that will that will set boundaries that are like pertinent to the survival of the tribe and the community, and the Papa Wolf or Mama Wolf will smack you the fuck down. I'm not advocating smacking down children, but like definitely like putting down, like there are certain things that you can absolutely come in as a wall to say fuck no, like that this is never ever okay, because it is important for the survival of the family and the community to move forward. So like anarchism. And so right around this time I was reading Ursula K. Le Guin's The Dispossessed, which if you've not read that book, if you are an anarchist, it's awesome because it's about two planets. One is an anarchist commune basically, and the other is a capitalist rot, like basically it's America times 20. Okay. And they have an exchange going on regarding like scientific, secrets and stuff like that. God, I'm like taking too long to explain this. Anyway, I read this book right around that time, and it was very enlightening to me about authoritarianism from a government standpoint has a lot of issues, but there is like an authority that needs to be agreed upon amongst individuals at kind of a community level. Like the community needs to be able to rely on one another and survive together. And we started approaching our family in that sense, in that same way of like, of what we learned at that wolf commune of just, what are our agreements as a family that will ensure our survival and trust with one another. No lying, no stealing, no, we're not gonna, if someone is feeling hurt by, like, just we set up these agreements together, and then it was kind of left on me as a father to be the sort of hammer that would come down, and not in a negative way, because to this day my one of my kids, who's an artist who moved out and he's going to school in Colorado now, he did this like art piece that had like a poem interlaced, and like it talked all about the Papa Wolf and how and he was like telling me this is like all related to you and like that wolf community that we went to.
That's really sweet. That's awesome.
Of just, kind of, I got a moth all of a sudden, of just, having that like the kids understood, that's the point I'm getting to. The kids like eventually understood how necessary those boundaries were in the times that I needed to not be always Mr. Friendly, like the importance of it, because now like being out in the world, they're like, oh, okay, we get it. And
that's good to hear, because it's difficult when they're 5, when they're toddler age, it's difficult to, for them to kind of grasp that this actually is for your own good, like I'm not just trying to be a spoil sport. Like really, like my least favorite thing would be to like make you unhappy, it's like the only reason I'm doing this is literally to make sure you learn this lesson to survive, so otherwise, well, that's great, man. Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, that is definitely one of those things where I think it's just more ironic now, as a father, having kids and having to be that authority that I always rebelled against, so it's the same thing where it's like, I don't know, at a certain point, like I'll be mad that my daughter is disobeying or lying or trying to trick us or being sneaky or something, but I'm like, I don't know, I can't blame her. I'm not like, I feel like it's in her nature to do that, so like obviously it's annoying, like that annoys you as a parent, because it's like, well, she's not minding me, she's not actually listening to what I'm saying, but she has to figure that stuff out, and I would much rather the kids, obviously figure that stuff out at home and maybe not get the answer that they want to at home with people that like care for them and want them to live, as opposed to like in the quote unquote real world where people literally don't give a shit about you. So
absolutely,
it's like, yeah, in a more
I was always
environment.
secretly like, when the kids would rebel, I was, I would be like, God damn it, like with them, like,
Yeah,
but then like secretly my wife and I, like, sneaking out the back porch and having a drink, smoke, whatever afterwards, and like kind of proud of the way they stood up. Like, good job for them. And we've always kind of encouraged that too. Like, absolutely, debate is open, and if you have a logical argument that can surpass ours, and if there's a reason for you win, it's logic and reason wins at this table. It's not a dictatorship in the sense that our say is always just the final say because it's law,
right. Yep.
So
yeah, they'll find out later on that shit's theory. It seems like it's law when you're a kid, but as an adult now, I know all those laws were theories. So
yeah. Well, good luck to you. I mean, geez, I can.
Well, thanks, man.
Only imagine, because I spent the bulk of my kids' childhood in a space where I was not embracing my artistic life. It was only until like when they were getting older that I was like, okay, I can do this. But you've been just kind of full force in their childhood, so I can imagine how much of a challenge it is for you to kind of juggle that, especially when
it's definitely since having kids, my workload, the amount I can get done, everything's different now. Of course, it's more of a balancing act, I guess, at this point. But it all seems to work out. Like, I try not to take on projects that I know that I can't, get done. I won't do anything that seems like I won't be able to get it done, or there will be problems. I don't like taking on any project that seems like there's going to be unnecessary difficulty in. So the thing that's nice about, I guess, having it's nice and it's not nice. Like, I have this family, so I have my day job, I have my editing, work that I have. That's nice because, I can make sure I don't have to chase down these publishers for, sending me. It still pisses me off that even has to happen, that artists have to, fight to actually get what is on the outset, like, agreed upon by everybody, it's just kind of, we always get the short end of the stick, it seems like. But fortunately, like, I don't rely entirely upon my comic book money for my livelihood. So for me, it's not going to like break me that they don't pay within the 45 days they're supposed to, or whatever it is that is agreed upon. But for other people it does, so I'm fortunate. I guess I'm fortunate in that sense. But also, like, I have that job because I have the kids. I reached a certain point a couple years ago where I realized if I were single, if we had no kids at all, I was probably making enough money with comics that, my life would look different, but I wouldn't, I would probably be able to sustain myself, but having kids, there's way more things to think about. So I can still do comics. I've never let anything else going on in my life stop me from making comics, previously. So just having kids just adds more things. Like, I add more things. I don't subtract things, I make beats also. I like animation. I do video editing. I draw. It's like, I usually don't minus things. I usually just plus things. So that's like a simplistic way of saying it. But, having kids was just like, it's just more stuff, more stuff for me to do. That obviously moves itself up like to the top of the priority list. So everything else kind of like shuffles down, but I'm always going to find, a way to make all that stuff happen. So
yeah, good for you, man. Yeah. I'm glad it didn't take you a long time or any time at all to figure that out. It seems like you're just kind of with it. It took me a while to figure that out. So
yeah,
kudos to you. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't take that leap and just, run with it all. So,
well, I had a few hard lessons along the way also. But I feel like I'm in a good place now where I stay pretty busy with commissions. I almost always have a commission or two that I'm working on. So I don't feel like I'm dependent upon like trying to pitch books or trying to impress publishers or ingratiate myself to editors or anything like that, you know. That stuff is all well and good, but like to me, I just like having a good time drawing shit that I think is cool, man. Like that's really what I want to do. Like, and getting paid for it is fucking awesome. So it's like that's like the best thing. So and like another great thing about commissions is that like you can always just say no. Like I turn work down sometimes. I say no. That was like the hardest thing for me to learn, honestly, was that you could actually say no to people. But and I had to learn that out of necessity because I just had taken so much on at a certain point. I had to start saying no to people, and then once I realized that I could say no, like that's a very empowering thing. Also, is you know, I guess it's maybe in contrast to what you're saying, that just getting yourself into the on button or whatever. Like, yeah, like I guess I've always been on, you know, but like turning it off is the hard thing, you know. So and like when given another opportunity, to me everything is like an opportunity. I don't know why I always see it as an opportunity. So even a commission or something, it's like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to make this dope ass piece. This is an opportunity for me to do this. But now I like to actually like weigh the benefits, you know, of that sort of thing. So if it's a character that I don't like, or if it's a subject matter that I'm not into or something like that, then I don't really hesitate to say that I'm not really interested in it, or maybe we can work something else out later on or something, you know. So like that doesn't bother me nearly as much now as it used to, whereas in the past maybe I would have said yes to literally anything that was offered to me, you know.
Yeah, is a powerful thing to learn. My wife was very integral into helping me say no to a couple of offers that came up to me in the past year or two, and they were actually paid offers too, but it was trying to weigh like what I was going after as an artist. Yes, I would like to get paid for my work, but I'm also just like a very intent creator. Like I have a bucket list of projects and stories that I want to complete, and yeah. I'm kind of feel like I'm racing time because I'm in my, God, this is like weird to say this, but I'm like in my like mid 40s. It feels so fucking weird to say that. And just because I'm just now starting, you know, I feel like I need to try to get some of these projects under my belt first before I start taking on, you know, all of this other work. And I was afraid to say no because it's like, but I'm just getting started, and what if, you know, and I'm glad that she was kind of there to support me and having that clarity, because there's a way to say no where you can still retain a positive relationship with the person.
Oh yeah, honestly, the best way to say no is to offer a ridiculous rate. That's what I've found. So like that's the best way to say no, is just to offer, like, be like, I'm kind of strapped for time right now, so I'd have to like do an expedited rate or something like that, you know, where it's just like, I'm sorry, this is how much it's going to cost. It's where it's like, honestly, like if they call your bluff, then which it's not really a bluff, because if you offer a ridiculous rate and then they're like, yes, I'm willing to pay that, then it's like, all right, well, then I'll prioritize this shit. Like, right. You know,
so now I'll know if I'm ask you for a commission after this call, like if you're like charging $1,000, that's basically telling me to fuck off. Yeah.
Except I wouldn't say
in a nice
I wouldn't
way.
Use those words. Yeah, I wouldn't use those words necessarily, but yeah. But I've found that's worked a couple times, for me at least. But
that's quite brilliant. I like it. So what is the a couple of questions here, just like regarding your process, your creative process. I'm actually interested, not really in the, actually I'm very interested in the technical process, but I want to dive a little bit more into the BUSTER psyche. So what music, what's the BUSTER Moody soundtrack? What's the BUSTER Moody art gallery or comic collection that is like drives a lot of your creative fuel, or that you listen to while you work, or
well, musically, I know it's the cliche answer, but I listen to every single kind of music, so it's not really limited to genre of music. I love hip-hop music, but I love electronic music also. I like instrumental music, post-rock. I don't know, man. I used to love hardcore and emo and screamo, so I still like all that stuff, man. I like real country music, punk, I guess like whenever I'm just drawing, what used to be the biggest influence for me, like art-wise, when I was drawing is I used to like to have like instrumental hip-hop music on. I really like Flying Lotus. I really like Daedalus. A lot of the electronic artists that are on Warp. I love Aphex Twin. I love Clark. So just kind of like beats, instrumental beats for the most part. I like a lot of sample-based beats. Jay Dilla is one of my favorite musicians ever to have ever lived. The way that he can completely transform samples into new sounds and emotions. Like I still am in awe whenever I listen to JD beats, like all the time. Dilla beats are like mind-blowing to me. So it really just kind of depends on what kick I'm on at the time. I like to follow rap also. So yeah, for real, it really just depends on kind of what mood I'm in at the time, and if there's something new out or what I'm feeling. But that's kind of like the music, I guess. The like art wise, if we're talking about like what comics are in my art DNA, or what artists, what influences are kind of like my art DNA, I would say we already talked about Eastman and Laird. The Turtles guys were big time for me. Mobius is huge for me. Honestly, if I had to like boil it down to a trifecta, it would be Mobius, Eastman and Laird, and Katsuhiro Otomo. So like those three key influences, combine all those things together, and that's kind of like that's where I would like to say my aesthetic comes from, I suppose. There are also other things. I grew up loving the Image founders. I grew up loving Liefeld, Jim Lee, Mark Silvestri, Eric Larson. All those guys stuff, Silvestri, like that stuff blew my mind as a kid. That's the stuff that like excited me into wanting to make comics as a kid,
Of course.
So like that stuff was huge for me. So like from there though, I also was like, so I guess maybe that was like my elementary school, I suppose. Elementary school to middle school, I was like still into those guys. And then kind of like by middle school, that's when I thought I would get into like serious comics, and I read, the Watchmen's and the Dark Knight Returns, and I found out about indie comics a little bit and learned of Art Crumb, and Crumb stuff blew my mind just because of the way that he could define the form and light and darkness with just with the line. So like the whole way that he rendered forms with his hatching, that was something that I hadn't seen before. Like I'd seen the turtle stuff, and obviously those guys were heavy into cross hatching. All the guys that did the turtle stuff for a while were not just Eastman and Laird, not just limited to them, but then like I saw that like you could actually show the contour of the shape that's there you could do the shape of that contour with the line, with your actual hatching, so like that's something that I saw whenever I saw Crumb, that you could do that. And then later on, through Travis Charest's artwork and him working on the Meta Barons, I found out, this was later on when I was in high school, I guess, I found out about the Incal and Meta Barons, Metal Hurlant and Mobius. So like that really like blew my mind. And that was like, I was 14, 15 at the time that I was like finding out about Mobius. And that's the same time that Dark Horse was reprinting those phone books of Akira. Oh, yeah. So like that was like my second renaissance, I guess, of my own like art, like the shit that really blew my mind. If the Image guys and Ninja Turtles were at first, you know, then like Mobius and Katsuhiro Otomo, the European sci-fi artists, and the like the underground comics artists, all of that stuff, you know, being exposed to that stuff later on, that really is like the formation of where my aesthetic comes from. And then also I recently realized that like my whole color aesthetic comes from the trading cards, man. Like it comes from the Goosebumps covers, like the covers for the Goosebumps books, the R.L. Stine books, and like the Hildebrandt brothers, their Fleer or their Marvel Masterpiece cards that they did. Peter Scanlan, the guy that did like some Marvel Masterpiece cards, Dave DeVries. I think my entire color theory comes from those guys, from like those Marvel Masterpiece and Fleer Ultra comic card sets that they put out in the 90s. Like that stuff mixed with the like the neon colors, the bright 90s neon, you know, the tacky 90s aesthetic, you know, that's kind of like where if you combine all of that stuff with those previously mentioned comic influences, then like that's the amalgamation that I feel like my artwork is. So.
I think that's where we started seeing a like huge variation in color as opposed to the comics, which were still fairly flat at that time. And when those cards started coming out, it was like, oh, that there's something different going on here. And I wonder if that was the first forays into computer coloring that were being utilized, or at least we were seeing some hand painted stuff as well.
Well, those cards were all painted. Like those guys painted that shit. Like I'm pretty sure the Hildebrandt brothers, Greg and Tim, they use acrylic paints, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Scanlan uses gouache. I think I saw him post that on Instagram. Dave DeVries looks like acrylic to me. So like, I think those guys were all real media. I think it was just those glossy printed cards were so vibrant, you know, like the artwork literally, I remember as a kid feeling like the artwork like was jumping off of those cards, you know. So, and some of those cards blew my mind too. And honestly, that's like the feeling, chasing all of those feelings is like the feeling that I want to make whenever I'm doing artwork. You know, it's like I want to draw some shit that makes me feel that same way, that sense of awe and wonder. And I think the Hildebrandt brothers, for me, that's where I may have learned like rim lighting. I didn't know that as the term, that's what it was, but like that secondary light source from behind the figure that like gives the outline of it in like a bright neon color. Like I'm like 90% sure that I learned that shit from looking at the Hildebrandt cards that they painted, you know. And this is all just a revelation that for me that like I learned this stuff from that. I just realized this within like the last couple of years, redigging up my old card sets that I had from whenever I was a kid, and I was like, oh, that's where I got that shit from, you know. Which that was really cool to kind of connect those dots, because I have like this, you know, I have this visual reference, this kind of like this timeline, this map that goes back through time of my mark making influence, you know, like as far as the way that I do my line work and that sort of thing for me. And that's like very clear to me. But the color aesthetic for me was just, I just always thought of, I wanted something that popped, you know, but now like actually tracing it back and seeing some of those Peter Scanlan cards and the Hildebrandt cards, I'm like, oh, I think, yeah, even like Boris Vallejo, you know, and Julie Bell, even some of that stuff where it's like, I know that they got some rim lighting on some of those tight ass spandex booties that they painted, you know, so it's like, so I really do think a lot of my aesthetic can be traced back to those card sets too. So
yeah, you know, as you're saying that's one aspect. You know, when I first think of Buster Moody, I think of your line work, but Limbo Beach really surprised me as to your level and skill of coloring. And this weird sort, and I think that the design of Limbo Beach in the story, that it's like set in this like perpetual twilight, really like lent to that particular style that you're talking to, of that secondary light source and this weird sort of dreamy monochromatic feel. And it led me to go back into your Turtle zine and to explore, you know, some of your coloring there. But what I really want to jump into someday that so I need to find a way to get a copy, but Task Force Rad Squad, which has that like 90s sort of like bam in your face, you know, type of like, you know, coloring that I think you're talking to, but it's still, man, it just, God, it pops. It's so amazing. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, man. And all credit to the Limbo Beach. I had a lot of color help on that. So credit to my flatter, Ludwig Olimba, who helped me out with that. Shouts also to Emily Alvarez and to Ross Taylor and to Cam and to Christopher Harris, everybody who helped out on that book also. Like, I did the final pass on all the colors, but I had a bunch of friends that came in and they helped me get the colors to the point where they needed to be, so that way I could kind of get the book out on time. So, well, I really appreciate you saying that, man. The color was a huge focus for me on Limbo Beach specifically, because at a certain point of producing that book, I had to get through the pages so quickly that in my mind, I'm thinking about the color when I'm doing it, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm maybe having to cut a few of my own personal corners for like my preferences of how I'll like lay pages out and draw pages, but it's like I know that I can carry a lot of this weight in the coloring also because I have these ideas for what's happening in the color in my mind already, you know. So
yeah.
So I appreciate the fact that that you noticed that and recognize that.
Well,
so
I'm just starting to learn that myself, and I did notice it in your book of that idea of like what you say, cutting corners, and that kind of triggered me, I think, in the conversation that I had with Matt Lesniewski and a conversation I had later with Ben Granoff about, you know, being very mindful of the work that I'm doing when it's going to be colored or not. And understand, because before I didn't really consider that at all in my first kind of 100 pages of actual published comic material.
Mm-hmm.
I just went for it, and then I went back in with the colors later. But now I'm trying to be really aware of that and understanding I don't have to like dive into every single panel like I did, because I need to think about how, like, what I want to actually do with those colors later. So I'm like just learning that, and I noticed it in Limbo Beach. So I was really appreciative of the fact of it, you know, seeing an artist that I respect, like not having to like do 100% line work in every single like page, that it's okay. I can move through this page without doing that, because I am going to go back later with, you know, which right now I'm actually just going back in with ink wash, and I'm playing with that, but it's still similar concept.
Well, yeah. Well, I thank you for that. For me, unfortunately, it was more of a less of an aesthetic choice and more of a necessity, you know, deadline. Just for hitting the deadline.
Yeah, which is always actually the greatest inspiration, really.
Right. Yep. So that was it for me. It was like, oh, I want this book to come out. You know, I wanted it to come out. I want it to be on time. I don't want anybody to have to be waiting for me. You know, if there's going to be any hangups on this, it's not going to be from my end. You know, so like that was really just my own. Like for me, the way that it goes, priority wise, I guess I should start out by saying, like, my favorite shit to do whenever I'm drawing a comic page is just to noodle around in the background and draw a bunch of details, and to just draw like little one-off jokes and things that I like. You know, I like to include all this stuff on the page, you know. So like that's like maybe my favorite part, the inking process, and just kind of getting lost in the rhythm of the drawing and kind of getting into that automatic zone, you know. However, with that book, I had to be just way more intentional. It had to be I had to just basically boil it down to the essence of what, to me, the least can be on the page, you know, to successfully tell the story. So it's like, what can I do? What can I convey here to say exactly what needs to be said, to communicate effectively and clearly and concisely to the viewer what's happening? And then if I have some time, then I'll like allow myself to, you know, indulge in some background elements and some of these other things, or like maybe I'll render the smoke clouds a little bit more ornately or something like that. You know, if I at least can hit that basic storytelling, you know, like touchstone. Like that's where it has to. That's the least of where the page can be successful to me. So that's the absolute least of what I have to do to, you know, before I can consider my work done on a page, you know. So yeah, unfortunately, like I said, though, sometimes that means I'm passing the buck to myself as the colorist. I feel like I would be way less likely to do that if I were not coloring the book myself. If I weren't coloring the book myself, I would have had to have done a lot more as far as the inks go in my own mind, you know. Just because I wouldn't have been able to trust the colorist to know what I was thinking for, you know, to fill in this space this way, or to make it to lead the eye this way, or to make it feel this way in a certain place. So yeah, that's for me. That's just kind of you know, storytelling is the priority, but like all of the other stuff that just kind of comes. If I can at least tell the story correctly, then I can get into like the stuff that's maybe the most fun part. I love the storytelling aspect also. I love laying out pages. I love thinking about how to lead the eye. I love that sort of thing. Like the technical aspect of comic book storytelling. Like I just eat that shit up. Like I totally do. But like if the goal is just to get this comic out, like I got to get the comic out, you know. So I'm gonna tell a good story. I'm gonna make sure that everything happens that needs to happen, you know. But maybe it's not gonna look like Jeff Darrow drew it, you know. So who's another one of my big influences, you know. So it's not gonna look like that. It's gonna be more stripped down than that. So yeah, whenever I look at Limbo Beach, to me, I'm like, I look at those pages and I know that I'll like it more maybe next year whenever I look at it. But now I just see like the compromises, you know. I like look at it and I see all of the corners that I cut instead of seeing the ways that it succeeds because I cut those corners, maybe, you know. But yeah, that's just my own personal hangups, I guess, with it. But
no, I get it. I after about a year's distance from my Psychonaut Presents trade paperback, I actually went back and looked at it the other, like a week or so ago, and was like, okay, all this shit that I was freaked out about, like, it's okay. Like, I'm all right. Like it, like I was too enmeshed in it at the time. And when I went to, I originally majored in studio art at Drury University in Springfield, Missouri, which is where I'm originally from. And the one thing that I learned from there, from a professor, shout outs to Tom Parker, was the separation aspect of the work is like really important. When we started a drawing class, when we started his like main drawing class, he had a textbook that he brought in, and it was Zen and the Art of Archery, and he just plopped it down and he said, go home and read this and don't come back to class until you've read it. I don't want to see you. And if it takes you until next time, if it takes you a month, I don't want to see you until you've read it.
Nice.
And which was like, what, for a lot of people, but I dove right in, and it was really cool. Like, so like only half the people ended up coming back because they're like, what the fuck is this? Like, we're paying for this. And, but it was very important because it he was you know, taught us about a level of I mean, it was really truly a Zen book. It was about a level of non-attachment within the process of the subject matter. And in terms of like archery, that's the way an athlete, you know, hits their target, whether they're running a marathon, whether they're shooting a bloated pig bladder into a basket or whatever. Like it's you know, there's this, it's the same thing with the creative processes, that there's not you can actually lose yourself in the like romantic notion of losing yourself in the work, and to find a way to look at it as more play. But also the book talked about this like weird Taoist way of being able to like focus on your subject matter. This guy basically, through that book and kind of, you know, working with him for 6 months, I feel very confident that, you know, if you look at my illustration work, that's one thing, but if I needed to 100% replicate something in reality through my hand that I'm looking at, I can do it. And I feel like I could teach almost anybody to do it. Like it is an integral part of the human DNA. And if you have the ability to have an awareness of your own consciousness, like you can do it. It is possible. So I think I was relating to you in this sense of just like that, having that separation helps. Sorry, I kind of went
to man, no, that's great.
A little bit of a tangent there, but it made sense to me.
I'd be curious, maybe does the metaphor have something to do with like the archer can't hit the target unless you let go of the arrow? You know, you have to aim, but you also have to let go. So I could see that maybe being a metaphor. I don't know if that is. And
the book, God, I wish I still owned that book. I think I lost it in one of my many purges in my life. But it was also about you are never going to actually hit the target. An archer never hits the target when they are so intently focused on the target as a separate object of itself that you're trying to achieve. So it was about this process of breathing and immersing yourself, like immersing the self with a capital S with the object as a subject, as an immersion of like oneself with what you are aiming for as an experience of relationship. And then letting go, and then it's like boom, it just happens. And I still even the page I'm working at now, I can still tell that the panels that I'm working on right now, there's one I'm staring at that's like staring me back and taunting me because I wasn't engaged in that level of like Zen style effort, and I was so attached. It's about that whole attachment non-attachment thing. I was so attached to what that result was going to be. I didn't allow myself the fluidity of just like having a vision and then kind of letting it play out however it's going to play out. I ended up forcing it, and so because I forced it, I know I didn't hit the target on this panel, but I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm just going to move forward, and maybe it'll end up being fine in the long run. But I'm sure you'll feel that way about Limbo Beach in the future.
Yeah. Well, it is. I guess it's that thing where an imperfect drawing that's completed will always be better than a drawing the perfect drawing that's never finished. So I definitely think that there's some that value to separating yourself from the art like that for sure.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. Well, you also do like shaman shit, right?
Shaman shit.
If I'm not mistaken, is that yeah.
Yep.
Well, you do like what would you call it then? Spiritual exploration. Psychonaut. Or Oniranaut, vision quests, I suppose.
Yeah, so it was actually part of the thing that finally got me to the point of like diving into comics. Finally. So I was like just not well for many years, and I had PTSD from a violent incident that happened to me a long time ago, and I was kind of trying to find a way to get my shit straight because I just had a kid. I had my first son. I was like, okay, I gotta get my shit together. I'd always experimented with psychedelics in the past and was always like very interested into their like therapeutic capabilities. But at that time, this was 18 years or so ago. So at that time, it wasn't as popular as it is now. It wasn't a thing where people are like, oh, you can use this to help veterans coming back from the war, that kind of shit.
Right.
And I just kind of started exploring like other modes of, health and therapy to get my shit in order. And I've always been really interested in indigenous stuff and indigenous spirituality, but like particularly their use of psychedelic plants in their ceremonies and stuff like that. And eventually, after just exploring and like trying to like getting involved in different communities and trying to find people that had like legitimate connections into the indigenous communities, I finally happened upon some and started for lack of a better term, you know, training in particular Peruvian traditions. And then finally going to Peru, not as like a tourist, but as actual, you know, we like my wife and I did like heavy work, and we did heavy training with curanderos in a specific lineage, mostly working with San Pedro, which is like it's a mescaline cactus. It's a mescaline alkaloid that is closely related to peyote. And doing a lot of work there, and also doing ayahuasca. And like ayahuasca, my first ayahuasca experience was what like really like pushed me to finally do it. Kind of, that was my first comic I finally decided to sit down and draw, was my ayahuasca experience. And it was nice. It was interesting for me to just understand that I didn't have to compartmentalize, you know, these various aspects of my life. Just fucking do it. And that's like the whole Psychonaut paradigm, was kind of doing some of these or exploring some of these experiences in comic form and using that as an opportunity to hone in on my craft a little bit, because I hadn't really made anything for years and years. I'm not a huge advocate for popular use of ayahuasca as like some people might think, because my experience was with hardcore legit ayahuasquero, like in the shit, and it was a lot, and it was very intense and it was such an intense that, you know, that I feel like
yourself, man. You can say if you pooped yourself, man. It's cool, man.
I actually didn't. So. Thank you very much. Okay. But I wondered. I went into it going, do I need to be wearing adult diapers? Because shit. Because I'd known about, I'd done all the research and listened to other people's experiences, but no, it was just such a. It was truly like what it, the term ayahuasca means vine of the dead. Huasca, aya is death, and the term huasca is like the interlaced vine that's almost looks like a DNA cord.
Is that in Quechua?
Yeah, that's a Quechua term.
Nice.
And which is weird because it's one of those terms that is they are Quechua words, but the Shipibo share some of that languaging with the Quechua. So it's like, but I think a lot of those, there was a lot of intermeshing of languages of a lot of the various tribes, because that's what the Incan Empire did, was kind of try to merge some of them together. But it is a fucking it was like a death experience. It was, and I experienced death style ceremonies with the San Pedro work. But it was so intense that my wife and I just came out of it going, man, we don't need to do that for a while. This isn't, the people that are doing these, like ayahuasca tourism deals where they're doing it like over and over, like day after day after day. I can't even imagine. Like either you are breaking someone's psyche down if they don't have like an adept ayahuasquero that like really knows their shit and is connected to a lineage, or they're not doing heavy doses of ayahuasca. And I know
I was gonna say it's maybe it's one of those things where they're just working up to the to the full-on trip. Like that was always a thing with at least with my circles. Whenever we were hanging out and we would have somebody, we would always, you work your way up to the heavier shit. You start off small and then you work your way up to like the full-on trip, so so it's possible maybe that's what they're doing. And then some people maybe can't go beyond a certain level, but they can still go back home and have the bragging rights or whatever to say. Because unfortunately, I think a lot of the psychedelic tourism as that as much as anything else. So,
Yeah, and I think a lot of the groups that I know of, especially that come through this area, I mean, these people are able to just like after the like 5-6 hour period get up and go home, and it's like, what? Like you were able to do that's weird. And I mean, if you read about so when I first started getting into this shit, I didn't read any popular literature. The guy that I connected to that was a part of these lineages was like, if you really want to know the true like ways in which this stuff is done, go find anthropological studies and texts. And that's what like most of my library is full of. And okay. I like you give me like a 800-page anthropological study that somebody did out in the bush where they're just giving the exact details of the ritual arrangements, and like I can read that shit all day every day. And that, you know, like some of those experiences are, you know, one dose could fuck you up for days and completely turn your life around. And you know, and mine was very close to that level of experience. The San Pedro is a little bit different, and I don't know if you've experienced mescaline in any way, shape, or form. And I don't know how different.
I've never taken mescaline, man. I've done a bunch of psychedelics. I've never taken mescaline. Taken some tranquilizers. I've done a lot of drugs, but I've not done mescaline. So
it's now I can't speak for peyote, although they are in the same family. But San Pedro is so I would say inviting in the sense that I always have felt like I was still fully attached to this world, but it gave me a doorway and an opening to, like, if I wanted to like shoot my consciousness and explore, you know, the cosmos, I can do that. But it's so easy to just boom, come back down here and be like, and be very stable too. Yeah, I've never and also, so that was actually the specific lineage that I got training in, and the curanderos that I worked with were like, some, you know, some people actually just do really well with that, and I like, that is definitely my medicine. I just, you know, there are some people that will take it and they'll drink it and they'll want to vomit, and they do vomit because it tastes, for some people they say it just tastes like ass. I think I love the taste so much. I just like, you give me a tea of like earthy San Pedro, I'm just like, I don't need anything to wash it down with or nothing. I just, I love it. And sometimes stuff just, and nothing has really resonated like that with me since LSD, because I was a huge LSD fan when I was in college, when I was younger. I just loved LSD so much.
Yeah, me too, man. I still like that stuff a lot, so.
Well, we'll have to get together sometime and
that'd be cool, man.
Explore realms. I you know, I definitely got, you know, a lot. I mean, it's not that I don't do it for fun, because it's not fun either. But I always try to respect the like traditions I was trained into, and like the ways in which they're used. But because I did get like a lot of the work I did with San Pedro and ayahuasca got me to this like place where I had like a lot of insecurities and a lot of fears. And I, again, like what I wanted to be as a kid, I wanted to be a comic book artist. That's all I could think. That's all I ever did. That's all I ever thought about. And then when I went to school, when I went to college, I just lost it. I completely just, I don't know. I let life just kind of like take control, and my fears take control. And, you know, finally, like getting into that stuff just got me to the place where it was like, fuck it, Daniel, just like jump in and do it. And I think the comics community is like as such nowadays too, where I think there's enough people out there that you don't have to be Marvel level artist, you know, to make good comics. That's not like what people consider necessarily good comics anymore. There's enough people out there. It's just like that everybody can be appreciated for their own style in their own way.
Yeah.
And that's definitely the stuff that I'm into. I don't need everybody to draw like, Todd McFarlane or John Buscema or whatever. I want everybody to have their own stuff. And that's what if I ever do look at mainstream, the only time I bought a mainstream comic in the past few years was when like Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg did like the Grand Design stuff, just because it's cool to see these independent takes of like mainstream stuff. Speaking of which, maybe this isn't a segue. So I just found out that you are a big Lance Stanton fan. Like, so how the hell did you find out about Lance Stanton? Because I only recently found out about Lance Stanton through the Power Comics channel with Evan Hesney and Ben Marr, and I fell in love. I always kind of liked that channel at first. I was like, oh, this is fun. But when they showed Lance Stanton, I was in love.
Well, all those books are the books that I dig for. Like, those are, whenever I go to shows, well, I guess aside from maybe, that bin that was at Fountain City with all the Corbin and Mobius and everything in it, other than bins like that, whenever I go to a show, I want to find the shit bins. I want to find the bins that are marked. There used to be quarter bins at shows. You used to be able to find those books at quarter bins, but now they're all dollar bins. They even used to be 50-cent bins, but I got all of my copies of Lance Stanton from 50-cent bins. That was one that I picked up every time. Any Hammock book I would pick up. So I really like collecting, especially, I wouldn't call them shitty. I would just call them small press, indie, black and white boom comics, small press. Like, it's all very, overly sincere comics. I love comics that are overly sincere. That's
a really good word. I love that.
Like unabashed. They're just like they're what they are, and that's the type of book that I like to dig for. So there are some books even in the 90s that are like that. You can find some small press books that are guys that are clearly trying to do what the Image dudes were doing, and Scorpion Core and Lethal Force and books like that, which are pretty cool.
Yep.
But yeah, like I love books like Lance Stanton, Life Brigade.
I got Life Brigade.
Beaumark. A lot of the Silver Wolf books. Those books were really cool. Of course, like the Tim Truman stuff and Grips, like. All of that stuff is awesome. Like those are the type of books that I really would look for whenever I'm digging through old black and white, old bins. It's those black and white books that I'm mostly looking for. Although obviously I collect a bunch of stuff, man. I got the CLZ app on my phone for all these runs of 90s, Cable and X-Force books and stuff that I'm trying to complete. But yeah, I love looking for those kind of books. So Lance Stanton was always a must pull for me. Because after the first time that I grabbed that book, I was like, this is amazing. This is one of the most like enthusiastically made comics that I've ever seen in my entire life. Like it is like, it's that unabashed feel where it was like, it's just like, fuck it, let's make a comic. That's what it like felt like to me. It felt like the epitome of like, fuck it, let's make a comic, and that was like the coolest shit ever to me. So like, for me, that's why I always loved Lance Stanton. And then like, it's all the things that everybody now loves for it, like the shirtless pose, the car, Lord Kragan, like
the car, oh my God.
The radioactive toxic wasteland, like the cyborgs, the marauders, like it's got all the shit, man. It's got like all of that cool shit, and it's like so like perfectly executed for what it is too. So.
Have you picked up the Floating Worlds latest edition?
Man, I ordered it. They haven't sent me my copy. I need to bother them about to make sure that they actually fulfill my order. So
yeah, you should, because it's actually quite beautiful. It's got this newsprint quality to the paper.
Nice.
It's gorgeous, and then you get some of those extra pages of issue 2 that he never completed.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that.
Yeah. So I was interested though. So actually, before I talk into that, you mentioned Silverwolf because I'm huge. So I'm the same. I love that kind of shit, and I'm aimed to have every Silverwolf book in my collection someday. And I last Planet Comic Con in April, I was digging and I found an old issue of Port from Silverwolf.
Yeah, that's Phil Hester. Yeah.
I know it's Phil Hester. So I went to go when I found it there. I was like, oh, fuck, Phil Hester's here. I'm going to go see if he'll sign my issue of Port. And I took it to Phil, and dude, he almost threw it back at me. He was like, you're the second guy that's brought an issue of Port to me to get signed. Are you guys playing a fucking joke on me? And I was like, I have no idea who came to you, Phil, but I actually, truly, legitimately love this shit. And he was just like, whatever. And he was like, he thought I was playing this practical joke.
Dude, it was me and Ryan Brown, because he actually came up to me. He came up to me after that and was like, "Did you send this guy over here with another issue of Port?" And I was like, "No,
that was me."
Yeah, well, that's awesome, man. Yeah, he says that he wants to buy them all back from people so he can like burn them all, you know. So
what? No.
So that of course makes that book a must buy now too. So I've got several copies of those Port issues too.
Oh my god, I loved that shit. I love Port. Oh my god. Why would you want to do that? So
he was like, I think he was 19 or something whenever he made that comic. It was
makes like it even better.
The stuff that he did for Silverwolf was like among the first actual comic work that he ever did. I think that he would just much rather that stuff all go away forever, to be honest.
I love nothing more than to see an artist progression. I love nothing more than to see that early work that like could have been drawn in the back of their fucking notebooks at school. Like that's fucking, and I'm not being like tongue in cheek and quiche about it. Like I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, me too, man.
You mentioned,
and that's why I like digging for those kinds of books, man.
Yeah,
that's exactly it.
100%. So you mentioned something to me off the record about a Wayward Warrior comic that somebody did that was like an homage to Lance.
I'm pretty sure it was Ed McNaughton, the other co-creator of Lance Stanton. I think he just published it with Hammock Publishing later on. So
really,
and I don't know what the story is behind that. I know that in the Power Comics interview with Dave Bamford, they mention it. I don't know. I don't really want to speculate too much. I kind of assumed that maybe it was just because Dave didn't finish issue 2. I think maybe he waited so long. Ed must have waited so long, McNaughton, that he just decided to go ahead and produce it differently. It's like a different take. It's kind of like they're trying to do like a tongue-in-cheek type thing, but I don't know how successful it is. But it's definitely of a different spirit than the original Lance Stanton book, even though it is a Lance Stanton comic. And it mentions that first story, but it kind of like mentions it like in a self-referential, almost like breaking the third wall kind of way. Like, yeah, we know that this is what the story was, but this is what we're doing now kind of thing. So it's been years since I looked at it, but I remember it being kind of odd like that, where it was just like, oh, I wonder if maybe this is because the second issue was not drawn, you know, like it wasn't finished, the artwork or something, but I don't know that for a fact. So
since you're into Power Comics, you obviously know John Tarr.
Yeah, John Tarr is amazing, man. I love John Tarr. Yeah,
so
I got issues. Yeah,
I showed you earlier a commission Matt Lesniewski did of my character, and that's in my Simon Myth issue 1 comic. My next issue I'm working on now, I got a commission from Tony Lorenz, John Tarr artist, of my character.
That's amazing.
As well. And Tony Lorenz is the nicest fucking guy on the planet.
Did you just reach out to him online?
Yeah, you just reach out to him on Facebook. I'm friends with him on Facebook, and he's getting a lot of work now because of Power Comics.
Oh, that's just great.
I
messaged Dave to try and get Dave Bamford.
Oh, really?
That did Lance Stanton. I'm trying to get a cable commission from him, man. I collect cables, so.
Oh, that's cool.
So I'm trying to get a cable cable commission from him at some point. So hopefully I can make that happen. But if I can't get that, I also would settle for a Lance, to be honest. Like Lance Stanton from the co-creator of Lance, an artist of Lance Stanton. Amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that. Well, Tony was great. Tony was really.
I love John Tar too. Yeah, I love that book also.
So much fun. It's so. Yeah. And apparently, Floating World's going to put out a Tony Lorenz collection. It'll have like the original John Tar and
nice.
His book Savage World as well.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah.
Oh God, I was like this team up between Floating World and Power Comics Channel is really a dream come true for me. I'm just like,
oh, it's great, man. Yeah, honestly, dude, and like as far as Lance Stanton goes, like seriously, it was like 10 years ago whenever I like first, so I'd gotten that comic before that, but that's when I had like basically decided that like the black and white indie boom stuff was going to be my collection focus for a while, you know. So I revisited Lance Stanton and became obsessed with it again. I redrew the cover like for somebody had one of those. For a while there were Tumblrs going on with like different themes, and somebody would be like, this is the recovered theme Tumblr where we have different artists that draw their favorite cover, they recreate it or whatever, you know. So I did like a Lance Stanton cover recreation like in an afternoon in a sketchbook one time for that. And,
oh, that's
but anyway,
awesome.
I was obsessed with it, and I shared it with a bunch of my comic friends. I used to, I don't know if I mentioned this in the comment, I think I did, but I used to just give copies of that book around to like friends, other creators that I was friends with, just so that way we could appreciate it together. So it didn't just feel like it was me that weirdly loved this random ass like comic, you know. So like there were so many times where I was looking at that and I'm like I was looking at Lance Stanton and thinking to myself, like, I'm the only person on earth right now that is looking at a Lance Stanton comic book.
And now there's a Lance Stanton community.
And there's like a whole, exactly. And that's what I was going to say is, I guess, so like I looked into it, man. I tried to find Dave Bamford. I tried to find Ed McNaughton at that time. I couldn't find anything. I could find like records of maybe I think that Dave lived in Massachusetts. So I found like kind of maybe where he worked or something like that in Massachusetts. And then I was like, I don't know if I'm going to just reach out to this random guy. So, and it's a different email address than the one that the Power Comics guys eventually found, you know? So yeah, like I envy those guys because they actually were able to do what I was incapable of doing, was actually finding him and contacting him. He did not have a Facebook at the time. Like he has a Facebook now, but back then he didn't have a Facebook.
I didn't know he had a Facebook. Yeah. I'm going to have to go.
Yeah, I'm friends with him on Facebook. He actually just left a comment on the post that I made with the shirt. He was like, "Thank you for your support" or something like that. So that was really awesome. So
I'm jealous of that shirt, by the way. I know that like you can get a shirt now through Floating World, but it's color. But like your black and white version is just yummy.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and I think that Ryan made 3 of those shirts. Maybe he made like 2 or 3 of those shirts, and like that's it, because it was just an inside joke. Like Lance Stanton was like our, like, not inside joke, it was just like our thing, you know. It was and he tried to find, you know, I'm pretty sure he tried to find Dave Bamford also, and we just could not find him like anywhere on the internet in 2012 or 2013. So yeah, man, once I saw that, like, well, yeah, so that was the thing. I guess I watched that interview again. I rewatched it, and I don't remember their names, Evan or whoever. They're better researchers than I am, but they say, I think that they saw the book just looking for small publishers, maybe on Mile High Comics. That's how they got it. But I know for a fact that the copy that Ben got was the copy that I gave to him, because I'd been making posts about it on Twitter and Facebook, like in 2012 or 13 or back then, whenever it was, you know, like there's that amazing splash page where he's like, "No, I'm not kidding," you know, and I'm always like, yeah, I'm not kidding when I say that Lance Stanton is my favorite comic either, you know, like I'm also not kidding, you know, like that's my shit. But so I like posted that one year, and Ben was like, "What comic is this? What the fuck is this?" You know,
right up his alley. Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. So I was like, Well, shit, dude, I'm going to Heroes. I'll bring you a copy of it at Heroes that year. So, and like I said, I showed it to Jim before I showed it to Ed because Jim had that black and white, the black and white zine that he did. I don't know if you've seen that, but he has like this zine where he took all these black and white Boom comics from the 80s, like old ads and stuff that are in them, and just random pages from, you know, maybe some Aircell shit, a bunch of the old stuff from like the 80s. And he put out this zine, and I was like, oh, there's no Lance Stanton in this? And he's like, what's Lance Stanton? And I was like, well, let me go back to my table and get the book for you. So I showed it to him, and he was like, you have to give me this comic. And I was like, sorry, man, that copy is already spoken for, you know. But yeah, man. But I'm happy that it went to Ben. I'm happy that the Power Comics did it because they're reprinting it, as opposed to like if Jim and Ed had covered it, then it just would be impossible to find. That's it, and then it would just disappear forever. So you know, outside of collector, I'm a collector, so like that shit kind of annoys me. But so yeah, like mad respect to the Power Comics dudes, where they're not only like, we're gonna blow this shit up, but we're gonna blow up the creator. We're gonna like actually, you know, make some things happen with this too, you know. Yeah. So that's like, mad respect to those guys. Actually, like infinite props to Power Comics for that. And yeah, like I said, their whole entire aesthetic is like my jam. Like that's the shit that I love. Those are the comics that I love sharing with friends. Whenever I go digging, Kyle and I used to do comic shows all the time together, and I would just go digging and just bring back a stack of comics like that, and we would just like have a blast looking through those shitty ass, you know, like, sorry, not shitty, but just those I would say actually amazing fucking, you know, small press comics from in the 80s. Like my mind has been blown so many times. I've had so many laughs. I just enjoy the fuck out of that type of comic.
Like the word you use was like correct, sincere, like, or maybe hyper sincere, like made us
overly sincere.
Overly sincere.
Overly sincere.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and like and the thing is, maybe the technical craft is not always there, but like these dudes, they don't give a shit. They're gonna make that comic, you know. Like that was the thing that is what I love about those comics, to where it's like you're not gonna see any book that's like that, obviously, from a major publisher, because those guys aren't ready yet or whatever. And it's like, the fuck can tell them that they're not ready to make a comic? They made that comic. It's like, look at it. That comic is, and it's fucking sick, you know. Like Lance Stanton is sick. That's like one of the dopest comics ever, you know. So yeah. Anybody who says that somebody's not ready to make a comic, or they're not ready for whatever, that's complete bullshit, man. Anybody can make a comic. Maybe even the less training, the better. I don't know. Like, depending on what you're trying to do, what kind of comic you're trying to make, you know. I think anybody can make comics though. So that's why I like that stuff. It's just unabashed. It's just like so enthusiastic for the medium. And I give that same answer for like zines. Why do I like zines? It's the same thing. It's just like, you don't need permission to do that shit, you know? And like the late 80s, what a time that must have been, to where like Ninja Turtles had just blown up. So like in 84 or whenever that came out originally, and like everybody was trying to invest in like the next big black and white comic. So like everybody was borrowing money from their dad or uncle or whoever, you know, whatever family relative could like lend them a couple grand so they could print up like, you know, 5,000 copies of whatever comic. So
that's the best era, like from 84, 80 to 86. Like everything I pick up that like rings so true to me, that's like a black and white comic, it's always within that time frame.
Yeah, it's great, man. I love that stuff. So you like the Silverwolf stuff? Have you seen Mercury Comics? That was I think that's the publisher prior. I think even that may have even been Chris Silver. It may have even been the first publisher that he worked for. I think was called Mercury Comics. But they did a lot of that same type of book, so maybe look into those books also if you haven't seen those, or whenever whenever you're going through dollar bins, if you see something like that.
From Mercury,
I'm trying to think of what some of those books were called. Maybe one of them was called The Eradicators, but I'd have to.
That's a Silverwolf book.
That is a Silverwolf. Well, then it may have been. The first Eradicators series may have actually been a Mercury comic, if I'm not mistaken. But,
all right.
But check out Mercury Comics also.
I mean, that is a problem with, I know this happens with Cartoonist Kayfabe, but with Power Comics, like some of them now, like they have become this like commodity, And
Yeah.
whereas something was just like $1 or $2 before it gets featured on Power Comics, everybody's looking for it, and then suddenly you have to pay $60 for something.
I will say though, as far as Power Comics go, that's not going to apply to the bins. That's not going to apply to the dollar bins it shows. So like, unfortunately though, the kayfabe shit applies to all the bins. It applies to everywhere across the board. Kayfabe covers a book inaccurately and they ruin the book entirely. So like, even if they cover it accurately, they ruin the book entirely. But more often than not, it's inaccurately covered and the fucking book is impossible to find. So, but like I said with the Power Comics, dude, I at least think that they show the appropriate love and they actually will do the research too and make sure that their shit is correct and proper. They're not flying off the cuff. They're not like talking out of their ass, you know.
Yep. And like you
although
say,
I will also
they
say,
prop
like
up the
John Tar
creators.
though. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, you're right though. Like as far as online second market goes, yeah, a lot of that stuff is potentially ruined like now. But
I'm pretty lucky that I have a flea market nearby that has like tons of bins of of comics that I don't tell anybody where it's at because I don't want anybody to get into.
Yeah, I was gonna say like
I'm not gonna tell you, man.
Yeah, where's this place?
I'm not gonna tell you, but I even ended up finding some cool shit there that I sent to. So their Power Comics Lava Night episode.
Yeah.
And they thank Daniel and everything. Like that's me. Like I've been like finding cool shit that I'm even sending to them that they're doing episodes on.
Nice.
And now I'm just not even like sending anything I find to them because it's such a gem. Like I want to keep it.
Yeah, don't send any of them, man. Keep all those books for yourself, to be honest, man. Yeah.
Well, he actually
that's the thing with all those books, man, that you can have that exact same experience. With all of those books, you will be the only person that's looking at that book in all of Earth right at that moment. Like nobody else is going to be looking at Eradicators #2 from Silver Wolf.
Oh yeah.
Like,
well, Evan actually had a comic that I wanted and I hadn't been able to find is Dog #1, and I was like, I had Lava Night from God, who was it from? I can't remember. Shit. But it was okay, but I really wanted Dog. I'm a Tim Vigil fan and Joe Vigil and all of that.
Yeah.
And I really wanted that comic, and so it was a good trade for me. I appreciated it.
Yeah.
But nice. Like everything else I'm definitely keeping.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, we're kind of like at the 2-hour mark, and that's where I usually like try to cap these if I can. Is there anything you want to like plug for yourself of like what you're working on, what's coming out, or just how people can get a hold of you?
Well, Limbo Beach is the last thing that came out that I've worked on. So, you know, and I get a small percentage on royalties of that. So if people want to buy that could potentially, you know, help me out. That would be rad. Yeah. Let me know what you think of it. Also, I'm always curious what people think of my work. Other than Limbo Beach, you know, I've got a new thing that I'm working on, an 8-page story for the new Horrorium. That's like the horror anthology book that Kyle and Matt Mitchell put together. They write the stories that are in it. So I'm doing an 8-pager with my buddy Matt Mitchell and that the next issue. So that should be good. And I've got like a pitch that I've been working on with Aubrey Sitterson that hopefully I can get that finished and off the ground soon too. Awesome. And then once that's done, I'm gonna try and get my Patreon back up and running, and maybe try and figure out the way that those people do like the commission Patreons, where you know, like it kind of aggregates over time or whatever. I need to figure something like that out, but mostly I just want to get Laser Storm started up again, so that way I can finish that initial arc of that story. But yeah, that's basically it for now. I'm on all the social media. You know, I'm on Twitter and Instagram and all of that stuff. If you just search Buster Moody, you should be able to find me.
I'll put all that in the description and everything for you. So yeah, no problem. And let me know when you get your Patreon up, and really appreciate hanging out with you, man. It was cool.
Yeah, thank you, man. It was nice talking, and yeah, always cool to hang out. So
cool.
Yeah.
We'll do it again sometime. All right. Thanks everyone for sticking around, and keep it psycho.